Hello there, I'm Sebastian Lindholm, and I'm going to show you the Grasshopper-powered Tekla Components. This is a way to let users benefit from visual scripting even if they aren't creating the scripts on their own. And at the same time, it's a powerful way of developing new Tekla component types without using the custom component editor or C#. So you will need Tekla and Rhino installed, and you can then download the Grasshopper component from Tekla Warehouse. When you install it, it will show up here in the side pane with other Tekla components and tools. When I double-click the component, it will bring up this dialog, and here it asks me to set a Grasshopper definition. I can pick any Grasshopper definition, so it doesn't need to be tailored specifically for this tool. So I can pick this clip angle definition that I created a while back. It will then examine the definition and bring in any parameters it finds to this dialog as properties. And when I activate the component for insertion, it will again check that definition for what kind of input is required from the model. In this case, it finds a column, which we can pick, and then it finds a beam. And then when I pick that, it will trigger that Grasshopper definition in the background, and it will place these objects for us here in Tekla Structures as a component. And I can then modify it through this dialog. So let's change a few properties, maybe add a few bolts. And each time I do a modification, it will again run that Grasshopper definition for us in the background to get the updates to Tekla. So let's try with something else. Here we have a spiral staircase definition. And you can see how it loads in the new parameters that it found in this new definition. And then we can activate the component and insert it. In this case, it requires a line. And then we get these objects placed into Tekla. And again, I can of course modify the component with the parameters. And here you can see one benefit of using Rhino Grasshopper for something like this, because the geometry for one of these steps is something that you perhaps would struggle a bit with to create manually in Tekla Structures. But since Rhino Grasshopper is so optimized for geometrical manipulations, we can just create something like this fairly quickly in Grasshopper and then ask that definition to keep reiterating and generating new geometry for us in Tekla Structures. And we're not limited to these numerical input parameters. We can also bring over other parameter types, like for example, we have connections to all the catalogs in Tekla Structures. And through that, we can change the profiles for these tensions. I'm going to pick something else here. And then the component updates those profiles for us. Let's try one more definition. Here we have a glue lamp arch. We get the new parameters, and then we can start placing that component. Let's place a couple of them. And here again, we can see geometry that would be a bit challenging in Tekla Structures because we don't have these catenary arcs as a chamfer type in Tekla. But here we can just ask Grasshopper to bring us different profiles by changing the parameters. And in this example, we can also insert connections. So if I change this drop down here to true, you see that we get these bolts generated for us. And if we go in and double click the bolts, we can see that they are actually generated by this AutoBolt component from the catalog. So this shows that you can add any component from the Tekla component catalog as a subcomponent to your Grasshopper component. And if we go back up to the main component, we can modify the properties of those subcomponents through this dialog as well. And we can also insert other Grasshopper definitions or other Grasshopper components as subcomponents to our definition. So let's see an example of that. Here we have a quite simple definition which just inserts an array of other Grasshopper components. And we can see what definition we're using here. It's the same as in the previous example, but this time it's a parameter and gets added as a subcomponent. So I place that component and it inserts an array of arches for us. And I can then modify them all together with these parameters. But I can also go in to one of the subcomponents and change only that one. And then when I go back up one level to the main component, it will remember the settings I had for that subcomponent. And in the same way, any component we inserted will remember what definition was used to create it. So when I double click this already inserted component, it will load in the parameters we used when creating it in the first place. So as you notice, we here as the end user, we don't see Grasshopper or any visual script anywhere. We just work in Tekla the way we're used to through these dialogues. And we don't need to launch Grasshopper either. That happens automatically in the background when needed. However, it is easy to modify one of these component types and maybe add parameters or change how they work. Or we can make a component completely from scratch using Grasshopper. And we'll take a look at that in the next video. But for now, thanks for watching.